Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Spectator Sports. We cover sports from a spectator's point of view. I'm your host, Sebastian Fonseca. This is episode number 140, and we have a lot to break down with week nine's action across the NFL. The trade deadline has come and gone, and remarkably enough, we are more than halfway through the NFL season in 2025. But before we get into the content, please do us a massive favor. Drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. If you want to get clips from today's episode, we got that for you here on YouTube in our various playlists as well as on TikTok. And if you want to enjoy Spectator Sports from an audio only experience, we got that for you on Spotify. I'll link everything in the description, and let's get into this week's episode. After a 1-7 start to the season, the Jets are in the middle of another lost season. Since the turn of the century, they've struggled to find stability at head coach, GM, and quarterback. They seem to have found something a couple seasons ago when they traded for Aaron Rodgers, but his much hyped season came to an abrupt end as he tore his Achilles just 4 plays into his Jets debut. Fast forward to 2025, Aaron Rodgers is a Pittsburgh Steeler, Robert Saleh is back in the Bay as 49ers DC, and the Jets are back starting from scratch. Over the past few seasons, however, the Jets did hit on several young players, building a strong defense in 2022 and 2023, led by Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. But after an unfortunate series of events dealing with Zach Wilson being a complete bust, and Aaron Rodgers' devastating injury, the Jets were wasting an elite defense. In 2025, they have decided to embrace a full teardown as Sauce Gardner is now with the Indianapolis Colts and Quinnen Williams is now a Dallas Cowboy. The Colts are off to a hot start this season, riding a rejuvenated Daniel Jones who was casted off from the dysfunctional New York Giants. Jonathan Taylor's having a monster season as Indy has been unleashing its offense on the rest of the NFL, scoring over 33 points a game. While their offense has been lighting up the league, their defense, not so much. The pass defense ranks just 26th in the NFL, and their total defense is middle of the pack at 16th overall. Their particular weakness comes in the secondary, as they've been giving up the most yardage outside the numbers. Enter Sauce Gardner. The Colts traded 2 first-round picks, one in 2026, one in 2027, and A.D. Mitchell to the New York Jets in exchange for Sauce Gardner. Since entering the NFL, Sauce has been exceptional, locking down an entire side of the field, earning first-team All-Pro nods in both his rookie and sophomore campaigns. But in year 3, something might have changed. I don't know what exactly happened. Maybe it was the scheme, maybe his hamstring injury was more serious than expected, or maybe it was just the drama that was surrounding the Jets in 2024. Despite all that, the Jets exercised his 5th-year option and agreed to a massive extension, locking him up through 2030, paying him the highest contract for a cornerback in league history. The good thing for the Colts that this pushes them into the win now window, as they now have a franchise cornerstone on defense that fits Lou Adaromo's scheme. Sauce will slide into a secondary with Cam Bynum and Charvarius Ward, and while Cam and Charvarius are pretty good cornerbacks, Sauce Gardner has his own pedigree and is in a league of his own. Was this an overpay? On paper, sure. But remember, the way things are looking for the Colts this season, these picks are likely to be in the 20s, if not the late 20s, depending on how things shake up this season. And this blockbuster trade was initiated by new Colts owner Carly Gordon. After the secondary got exposed in their loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Carly dropped a legendary bar. Do you want to put a band-aid on it, or actually fix it long term? Irsay Gordon, of course, is taking over for the late Jim Irsay, who unfortunately passed away in May of this year. She has made an immediate impact since taking over as Colts CEO. With the help of her sisters, who each have been involved in the organization for the last 14 years, Carly has brought a new culture to the Colts and is already paying off. She's present on the sidelines, donning a headset, staying involved, listening, watching, talking, and working. She said that wearing a headset on game day also has helped her identify what tweaks, resources, and/or fixes the team might need to improve overall operation. And while some may call this micromanaging, it's helped lead the Colts to a 7-2 record, the best since the Peyton Manning era. And it's safe to say that her insight has made an impact. The trade for Sauce Gardner addresses a pressing need and also continues to build around Daniel Jones, as Carly Gordon has made it very clear that she's pushing all her chips to the middle of the table, saying that the Colts are all in. It's been a documented history that after the Michael Parsons trade, the Dallas Cowboys defense was lacking some tenacity as it ranks as one of the worst units in the NFL. The newly acquired Kenny Clark has been solid, but after 9 games, Dallas needed to beef up their interior defensive line. Enter Quinnen Williams. The trade with the New York Jets includes a 2026 second round pick, a 2027 first round pick, which is the Cowboys pick, and defensive tackle Mazi Smith, who just never seemed to fit in Big D. Now, the entire haul for Micah Parsons is pretty impressive, and not to mention, they do get an extra $20 to $25 million in cap space by trading Micah Parsons. And since Quinnen Williams is a relatively cheap contract for a defensive tackle, this adds extra cap flexibility going forward. The former Jets defensive tackle has 2 years left on his deal and is still 27 years old. Williams can act as the defensive anchor that Dallas desperately needs, as they can also use the draft capital and cap room to build a defense around him in the future. The Cowboys honestly didn't overpay compared to the Colts, and I really like that they addressed an immediate need while maintaining cap flexibility to wheel and deal picks in the future, and while receiving an elite interior defensive lineman in his prime. The biggest thing is that this move is going to help them not just right now, but also for years to come. To talk about just 2025, I don't know if this is going to be the quick fix that Cowboys fans may expect, because they've already gotten off to a slow start. They just lost to the Arizona Cardinals. They stand at 3-5-1, and they still have major problems in their secondary, as Trayvon Diggs is still out due to a concussion, and Deron Bland, well, you all saw the tape, right? Their secondary is still pretty leaky, and this team still has to play the Eagles for a second time. They have to play the Lions and the Kansas City Chiefs and LA Chargers within a month. So this defense is going to be tested pretty much immediately right off the bat. And while they have made some improvements, each team that's coming up on their schedule, with the exception of the Vegas Raiders, has an elite quarterback capable of tearing up this Cowboys secondary. The other big question is that can Matt Eberflus take advantage of this replenished talent? Since taking over as Dallas defensive coordinator, the defense has been utterly dreadful, getting shredded by Jacoby Brissett on Monday Night Football. And we've seen in games past, they've also gotten shredded against Caleb Williams and Bryce Young. The jury is still out if this move will be able to really fix them in the immediate run. But if you look at this from a long-term perspective, I do think now that trading Michael Parsons and getting back two pretty good defensive linemen plus several picks and cap flexibility does give them more options for the future. But it remains to be seen who will be the true winner from that historic deal back in August. My takeaways for the Jets sides of things is that while it may not be what Jets fans wanted, I understand the logic of their GM. Why pay players when you don't have much of a supporting cast? Because with this move, the Jets went into full rebuild, and I think that is the right way to go about it. The haul they got with these two trades has yielded 6 first-round picks within the next 2 drafts, and picks are like lottery tickets. There's no guarantee that the Jets are going to be able to strike gold like they did in the past and get a new Sauce Gardner or a new Quinnen Williams. But the fact is, why pay them when you know that this team isn't going to compete? You're already 1-7 with these folks already, and it's not particular their fault, but they were able to see the writing on the wall that this team is going nowhere, and they acted fast, and they picked the right time, because I think if you maybe play out this season, their value would have given them less of a haul. So the fact that you're able to get these contracts off the books at the trade deadline is a massive win for the New York Jets. These trades are the biggest blockbusters of deadline day, where we saw a total of 8 trades go down. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on who won these trades. Did any team overpay? Does this trade make the Cowboys playoff contenders? Does this trade make the Colts Super Bowl contenders? Time will tell, but for all we can do is sit back and be a spectator. I've been dunking on the Miami Dolphins all season long, but things went from bad to worse in an humiliating 28-6 loss to the Baltimore Ravens as the Dolphins dropped to 2-7 on the season. For the first time since joining the Dolphins in 2022, we saw Mike McDaniels actually show some fire on the sidelines. After Larry Borom commits a costly false start, thwarting a 4th-and-1 attempt inside the Ravens' 20-yard line, McDaniel lost it, but things went from bad to worse as Riley Patterson coincidentally misses the field goal, leaving the score at 7-3. Tua was particularly bad in this game where he didn't show any type of fight, taking a bad sack on a Hail Mary attempt just before halftime or checking it down to Devin Achane on 3rd and 17, and later threw his 11th interception on the season, which at the time tied Geno Smith for the most interceptions in the NFL. In a year where Tua has made several strange comments in his post-game press conferences, ranging from throwing his teammates under the bus, wishing he was taller so he could see in the pocket, or complaining about how Ravens fans took over Hard Rock Stadium. It's all just cringe at the end of the day. The next morning, it was announced that GM Chris Grier and the Miami Dolphins would be parting ways, which is just a nice way to say,
"You're fired. You're 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 fired."
Grier was the Miami Dolphins GM for 9 seasons, dating back to 2016. But after this latest loss, Stephen Ross had seen enough and released a statement saying that the focus was to move on to 2026. The timing was weird, knowing that the trade deadline was only a few days away, but I think the real reason why he was fired because it was likely that Chris Grier was going to hold on to guys like Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, or any other veteran that could maybe garner some draft capital for the future. As we saw in the trade deadline, Jalen Phillips was traded over to the Philadelphia Eagles with the new interim GM taking over. But let's go back in time and analyze some of the major events and moves that Chris Grier made during his 9-year tenure with the Miami Dolphins. Starting off with his draft history. In 9 years as Dolphins GM, Chris Grier made 61 draft selections, with only 22 of them remaining on the roster. In 2017, he took Charles Harris in the first round and ended up being a total bust. In 2020, he had 3 first-round draft picks, and Tua at the time was this draft class's saving grace, but we all know that with the 5th overall selection, the Miami Dolphins ended up passing on Justin Herbert, who ended up going to the Los Angeles Chargers just a pick later. And look how each quarterback has gone on in their career. One in Justin Herbert has become a franchise quarterback. Just look at the regular season stats compared to Tua's. It's night and day who has become the better pro since entering the NFL in 2020. In 2021, Grier had a better draft selecting Jalen Waddle and Jalen Phillips. But the following drafts in 2022 and 2023 were greatly diminished due to the Tyreek Hill trade and a later forfeiture of a first-round draft pick due to a tampering scandal. Go to 2024, the Dolphins select Chop Robinson, who has since only accumulated 6 sacks in his 2-year career. To make matters worse, one thing that Grier did was miss on some really good talent. Let's go back to 2017, where he could have had TJ Watt but elected for Charles Harris. In 2020, he missed on Michael Pittman or T. Higgins. And then in 2024, he could have drafted Quinnen Mitchell to shore up the secondary. And look at this year where he selected Kenneth Grant just one spot before Tyler Warren, who already looks like an all-pro caliber tight end. Looking even further, 17 of Grier's 61 draft picks have gone on to have major success with a different team compared to their days with the Dolphins. Look at Robert Hunt, who is now having a very successful year creating running lanes for Rico Dowdle in Carolina. Andrew Van Ginkel, who was a very productive linebacker for the Miami Dolphins and followed Brian Flores to Minnesota and came out last year with a second team All-Pro nod and also a Pro Bowl appearance. This means that Grier has had a terrible track record of talent evaluation and keeping bad talent on the roster, but also letting good talent walk out the door. And while drafting and developing talent is one thing, let's now transition to Grier's management of the salary cap. Chris Grier gave Tua Tagovailoa a $212 million contract with $167 million guaranteed, despite knowing the history of concussions that Tua sustained as he started his career. With how backloaded the contract is, this makes Tua's contract one of the worst in the NFL and completely untradeable. Let's say if he was cut for the June 1st deadline, the dead cap would have shattered the previous record set by Russell Wilson when he left the Denver Broncos at $99.2 million. If he is let go post June 1st next season, the Dolphins could potentially spread it out in 2026 and then pay the remainder in 2027. 3 years ago, the Dolphins traded for Tyreek Hill, and the move was supposed to propel the Dolphins into not just playoff contention, but even Super Bowl contention. Instead, the Bills never was able to get past the Buffalo Bills in the AFC East and settled for 2 wildcard exits. This year, Tyreek Hill would unfortunately suffer a catastrophic knee injury where it seems that his future in the NFL is in major doubt. Just 2 seasons ago, the Dolphins decided to make a trade for Jalen Ramsey with the Los Angeles Rams. And in that move, it ended up backfiring almost immediately as he seemed to not have a good relationship with any of the coaching staff, as this led to the departure of Vic Fangio. And despite the initial year where we saw the rocky relationship with the coaching staff, Chris Grier decided to re-sign Ramsey to a 3-year, $72 million extension, and only for the relationship to continue to sour, leading to Ramsey's eventual departure to Pittsburgh. You can see how years of poor drafting, roster, and cap mismanagement have led to the Dolphins' current state of affairs. He overpaid for veterans and let good young players walk out the building and left the team with 0 debt. Now, turning things to Mike McDaniel. Well, McDaniel came to Miami with the aspirations of fixing Tua, developing Tua. And while we have seen some success in 2022 when Tua was healthy, and then also in 2023 where he actually played all 17 games, Tua looked like a budding star. But we also know that Tua has missed a lot of time due to injuries. And that might have been McDaniel's saving grace to say, well, yeah, I mean, I had some success with Tua, but he also hasn't been available. But the other problem is that development concept hasn't quite totally kicked in with Tua ever since Mike McDaniel joined the Dolphins. We talked about in a previous video of how Tua has struggled to adjust to coverages by the defense post-snap. And we've seen him stare down receivers, leading to back-breaking interceptions. And Mike McDaniel was supposed to coach this out of Tua. But instead, we know his system is built on quick passes and anticipatory throws. But Tua's fatal flaw continues to get exposed. You see Tua drop back into coverage. He doesn't really scan the defense and then stares down his first read, and it later turns into an interception. It's likely that we'll see Mike McDaniel last the entire season, as I think there's just might be too much change happening at once. And at this point, you let McDaniel coach out the rest of the year. Maybe he can turn it around, and maybe you don't have to really make too many adjustments come this offseason, and it would just be bringing in a new GM. The problem is, though, it's very likely that that new GM would like to have a fresh face, his guy brought into the team. Regardless whether or not Mike McDaniel stays as head coach, the Dolphins are still a very unfavorable destination to a prospective head coach and GM. They have to deal with Tua and his contract, and we know that it's basically an albatross at this point. He's an injury-prone quarterback that has missed time in the past. You don't know if he takes a bad hit, that's the concussion that sends him to an abrupt retirement. From the roster standpoint as a whole, there is a lot of aging vets that are likely going to further impact the salary cap situation. While you may decide that, okay, you could embrace what the Broncos did and just cut Tua loose and eat the dead cap, that significantly hinders what a potential new regime could do in years 1 and 2 as they try to build a new foundation for the Miami Dolphins in the future. The only path I see for the Dolphins at this point is just to build through the draft. Fortunately, thanks to the Jalen Phillips trade, Miami now owns 5 picks within the top 100 selections in next April's draft. And this could be a huge opportunity to get great talent on the cheap. And while you can give Tua a year to maybe prove himself and show that he can play some solid football, this also gives you an opportunity to evaluate the quarterback position and see maybe Tua can find a resurgence in his career with new leadership at the front office and with a new head coach. And if it doesn't pan out, well, then you don't have to eat $99 million in dead cap and then cut him loose in 2027, where that dead cap is only a third of what it would be in 2027 compared to what it would be in 2026. Depending on how it plays out, Miami is going to be at a crossroads very soon, and they have a lot of decisions to make. You have a quarterback who you either can decide to commit to or cut loose. You have a head coach that has been good in recent years, but has definitely tailed off the last 2 years of his tenure. And you have a wide open GM position that has to do a lot to fix this roster. But it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. But we all know that the teardown is absolutely coming to the Miami Dolphins. It might be time to buy into the Carolina Panthers. For the first time since the start of the 2021 season, the Carolina Panthers are above 500, scoring a huge upset win over the Green Bay Packers, despite being a 2-touchdown underdog. The Panthers offense has transitioned to riding their new bell cow running back Rico Dowdle to victory. Dowdle's 2-week rushing explosion coincided with Carolina's recent hot streak. But once Chuba Hubbard returned to the lineup, Dowdle was forced to split carries. Fortunately for the Panthers, head coach Dave Canales wised up, entering week 9, distributing the backfield touches to the more explosive Rico Dowdle, as he ran violently through the Green Bay Packers' top rushing defense, setting up an aggressive, fearless tone for the visiting Panthers. Dowdle put the Panthers on his back, rushing for 130 yards and accounted for both of Carolina's touchdowns. But more importantly, his ability to knife through the Packers' interior defensive line gave the Panthers a viable method to move the ball in a low-scoring affair. But if it isn't clear already, by any means possible, get this guy the ball. It shouldn't have surprised anyone that Dowdle was the one that ripped off a 19-yard run to set up Ryan Fitzgerald's game-winning field goal. Part of his dominance has to be attributed to the offensive line of the Carolina Panthers, who did a great job creating large gaps against a very good Packers defensive line. And this allowed Dowdle to surge through. But I thought the biggest accomplishment that this Panthers offensive line did was that they completely shut down Micah Parsons. Because for the first time in his illustrious career, Micah Parsons didn't record a single pressure. And that's a huge bonus when you don't have to worry about one of the best pass rushers in the NFL against Bryce Young, who at this point is kind of a game manager, but still made the throws when he needed to help deliver the Panthers the victory. But it's clear that the Panthers have found an identity as a run-first team, and Dowdle is the guy that is currently rolling and is the key component to the Panthers' recent success on offense. Let's talk about the Carolina defense, because they had a stingy showing on the heels of getting completely steamrolled against James Cook and the Buffalo Bills. The Panthers headed into Green Bay and stymied a Packers offense that just torched the Pittsburgh Steelers a week prior. Yes, Green Bay did rack up 369 yards of offense, but only mustered just 13 points because how the Panthers defense was able to tighten up at the biggest moments. It required a total team effort from their defense. Christian Roseboom led the way with 15 tackles, playing sideline to sideline. Trevin Wallace tallied 9 tackles himself. Nick Scrouton made a big difference against the run and the pass. But I think the biggest impact was from Trayvon Moehrig, who put together an excellent game, finishing with 5 tackles, including a couple of crucial stops, including a massive tackle for loss on 3rd and 3 when Green Bay was threatening to take the lead. And his biggest play of this game was an interception where he was able to cut off a pass targeted for Christian Watson, and his huge return set up the Panthers' go-ahead touchdown. One particular down symbolized this team effort from the Panthers' part, where on 4th and 8 from the Carolina 13-yard line, a play saw Love take more than 11 seconds to scramble before launching a desperation pass to the end zone, where the coverage was able to hold up as the defender was able to knock it down and force a turnover on downs. And in that same play, the pass rush was still able to deliver a nasty hit on Jordan Love to affect the throw. The Panthers played as if they took last week's disappointing loss personally, and they were out to prove it against a Packers offense that has proven to be problematic in the past. But clearly, with this newfound defensive identity and a run-first mentality on offense, the Panthers are going to be an absolutely tough out to anybody coming up on their schedule. My concerns for the Packers returned as they flopped in several key moments against the Panthers. This loss felt eerily similar to their first loss of the season against the Cleveland Browns. It seems that the Packers appear to be a team that plays down to their competition. We saw them settle for a 40 to 40 tie against the Dallas Cowboys. They had to hold off a late rally from Joe Flacco and the Cincinnati Bengals. They then had to come back from a fourth quarter deficit against Jacoby Brissett and the Arizona Cardinals before finally putting together their first complete game of the season, culminating in a 35 to 25 victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers last week. Jordan Love had his best game of the season, finishing 29 of 35 passing for 360 yards, 3 touchdowns, and best of all, no turnovers. But right when we gained some confidence with this Packers team, they put together a mediocre performance littered with several self-inflicted mistakes. Anybody who watched this game could agree that the Packers outplayed the Panthers in the first half, but trailed 7-6 heading into the break. The second half continued the trend of self-inflicted mistakes, including a missed field goal, an interception, and a turnover on downs, before finally scoring to tie up the game. I felt that Jordan Love's decision making came under scrutiny once again because I didn't know what he was thinking when he threw that ball into triple coverage, only for it to be intercepted. And this turnover turned into the go-ahead score for Carolina. His failure to find the open target on 4th and 8 was the product of quality defense, but also indicative of how Green Bay has repeatedly wasted opportunities to score. We've seen plenty of hero ball from Jordan Love throughout his career, and I feel that this is too much of the reckless Brett Favre compared to the more careful and calculated Aaron Rodgers, because many do dub him as the perfect combination of Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre. But like I said, I've seen a little bit too much Brett Favre for my liking, and I would prefer the much more risk-averse Aaron Rodgers version. To sum it all up, the Packers reached the Panthers' red zone 5 times on Sunday, but they finished 1 for 5. Their first 4 drives within the Panthers' 20-yard line resulted in fumble, field goal, and a turnover on downs on a day where they outgained Carolina 369 to 265. Those points left on the field proved to be critical, as this might have been the difference in a 3-point loss and will hopefully serve as a harsh lesson learned moving forward. To make matters worse, the Packers lost their top target, Tucker Kraft, who tore his ACL and will be missing the remainder of the season in what could have been an all-pro caliber season. Remember that they're already missing Jaden Reed, who is slated to miss major time as well, and while Christian Watson is back from ACL surgery, it's going to take some time until he gets back to full health. The Packers suddenly become very thin at skills position as they embark on the second half of their season. The trade deadline is known as Howie season, and boy did Howie Roseman ever deliver. 3 trades before the chaos that ensued on Tuesday afternoon, as these moves provided the Eagles defense with a plethora of reinforcements. Let's start with the biggest move, Jalen Phillips, as he was traded from the Miami Dolphins for a 3rd-round pick. One of the biggest weaknesses so far in 2025 has been edge rusher, and now this move addresses it. Trading for Phillips brings in a guy with a relentless motor and reunites him with Vic Fangio, who was his defensive coordinator in Miami in 2023. That was the year where Phillips had his most productive year that was unfortunately cut short due to an Achilles tear. We all know the injury history has been a major concern for Jalen Phillips. We talked about the 2023 Achilles tear that was later followed up in 2024 with an ACL tear. A terrible combination in back-to-back seasons, but despite a quiet start to 2025, he's compiled 3 sacks in his last 6 games. He now joins a Philly defense already very familiar with Fangio's scheme and terminology. Given his age at just 26, if Phillips is productive for the rest of the 2025 season, there's a chance that the Eagles may try to re-sign him, as this could add to their stable of young pass rushers. Phillips joins an edge rushing room that includes Jalix Hunt, Nolan Smith, Josh Uche, and Brandon Graham, who's back from retirement. Most of these pass rushers are small speed rushers, but Phillips provides a different body type, as he's 6'6 and 260 pounds. The bigger body frame allows him to use an array of power moves, and his length provides more opportunities to swat the ball in case he doesn't get home. And with the attention focused mostly on the interior defensive linemen composed of Jordan Davis, Moro Ojomo, and Jalen Carter, there's a good chance that Jalen Phillips will have major success coming off the edge for the Philadelphia Eagles. Earlier in the week, Howie Roseman made moves in the secondary. He traded for Jair Alexander on Saturday and Michael Carter II, as both were brought in to shore up the secondary and also provide depth, as there's still some questions at the cornerback 2 position. What I like about Howie is that he's taking shots, and the more shots you take, eventually something's going to stick. He's already made moves to address the cornerback 2 position, where now there's options of Jair Alexander, Jacorian Bennett, Adoree Jackson, or even Keely Ringo. One of them is hopefully going to cement their spot across of Quinnen Mitchell, as Jair Alexander is already familiar with the defensive back coach who shared time with Alexander in their tenure in Green Bay. Michael Carter II was drafted by Joe Douglas, who is now back with the Eagles front office staff. As you can see, each of these moves are predicated on familiarity and a prior connection to the player, which can prove to be vital as the Eagles resume their pursuit of going back to back. Luka Dončić has been cooking so far in the 2025-2026 season. After taking the offseason to focus on his diet and training, skinny Luka is lighting up the NBA. Through 5 games, he's averaging 40 points a game, 11 rebounds, and over 9 assists a game. And he's doing this on a career high 50% from the field. Additionally, thanks to his improved conditioning, his defense has also improved drastically, leading to an uptick in defensive energy, and this is something we haven't seen in years past. His latest great performance came against Wemby Spurs, where both teams were missing key contributors, where the Lakers were missing LeBron James and Austin Reeves, and the Spurs were missing Dylan Harper and De'Aaron Fox. We talked about Victor Wembanyama and how he's got the Spurs to their first 5-0 start in franchise history. Well, for the second game in a row, he's been a little bit off compared to that 5-game stretch. Against the Suns, he was kind of off, and the Spurs dropped their first game of the year. Can't win them all. Against the Lakers, he was marred by foul trouble, as this definitely impacted his rhythm and him getting into the flow of the game. Like I said earlier, the biggest difference with Wemby this year has been his ability to get downhill. Credit to DeAndre Ayton. I thought he did a great job in battling down low against the bigger, taller, more talented Wembanyama. And between him and the Lakers team defense, I thought they did a great job of sliding in whenever Wemby got downhill to draw offensive fouls. And the latest offensive foul costed him dearly, as he fouled out of the game late in the fourth quarter. I thought Stephen Castle, while he didn't have a great offensive game, did a great job in holding Luka in relative check. After Luka had a strong start to the game where he scored 20 points in the first half, he cooled off in the second half, and Castle, I thought, did a great job in holding Luka to just 9 of 27 shooting in the game. The Spurs controlled this game, and then up until the last 3 minutes of the fourth quarter, this is where things started to slip. Luka hit a step-back three-pointer to take a 113-112 lead, and this is where the Lakers just simply never looked back. As we saw the Spurs offense dry up, as Wemby had no choice but to sit on the bench and watch his team, Luka was able to take over and finished with a really great game where he had 35 points, 13 assists, and 9 rebounds. But what almost spoiled this was Marcus Smart committing a nearly catastrophic turnover where he was too casual with the inbound pass and wasn't fully across to launch the ball deep that would have ended the game, but instead gave the Spurs a chance to inbound just right underneath their basket with a chance to send the game into overtime. And fortunately for the Lakers, Champagne missed both free throws, and the Lakers were able to hold on to win their fifth straight game after a 2-2 start. I really want to talk about how skinny Luka has been because I talked about how great his offense has been and the efficiency is up, but the training and conditioning have really impacted how he's been playing defensively. He had 5 steals against the Spurs, which ties a career high. And I think that whatever he's done to lose the weight, he just looks better. He looks faster. And that's translated to his step back game, his first step being a lot quicker than the back end of the 2025 season. And this has allowed him to get a lot of separation. But that defensive side, though, he's been able to be an improved defender where he can play the passing lanes really well, get deflections. And Luka does have the body to be at least a decent defender, but we know that he's been dubbed the cone. He's been slow, just lazy. Well, this is a new and improved Luka Dončić. And he has the Lakers as an elite team in the West as they currently sit in second place, only behind the defending champion Oklahoma City Thunder. Thanks everyone for tuning in to this week's episode of Spectator Sports. Remember, we are on the grind to 400 subscribers by the end of the calendar year, so it would mean a massive difference if you could drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. We got a bunch of clips here on YouTube and our various playlists, as well as on TikTok. And if you want to enjoy Spectator Sports from an audio-only experience, we got that for you on Spotify. I'll link everything in the description, and shout out to Joey for editing this podcast. And I'll catch you all on the next one. Take care, everybody.